So the Elden Ring just launched. Well, actually it launched last week. We waited a few days to see if anything would sort of come to light about the game. So today we're gonna talk performance, talk about minimum specs, requirements, and just kind of where you can find that magic 60 FPS number, because you know that's where the FPS caps out on that game. Good old console ports.
EVGA is proud to announce their new X570 for the Win motherboard. With multiple RGB and ARGB LED headers, fin stack heatsink switchable BIOS, and 15-phase digital VRM, the X570 for the Win motherboard brings EVGA's legendary build quality and performance to Ryzen processors. To learn more and see the full feature set, follow the link in the description below.
Now obviously for us to do any sort of performance metrics and testing on the Elden Ring, we need a system to do that. And instead of building one, our friends over at Nzxt were kind enough to send us one of their custom BLD options. Now BLD, you can have a kind of a predetermined pre-built from them, or you can use the custom PC builder and spec one out yourself, which is exactly what they did for us. I didn't spec this, they spec this one. So we'll go ahead and go over those right now. The case is the H10 or the H510 Flow, which essentially replaces the glass in the front with a mesh panel. I opted to take the fan filter out because I like to have as much airflow as possible. We call this one the Steve appeaser. You wanna make Steve stop bitching? Just put a bunch of holes in your case for airflow and he'll shut up, guaranteed. Maybe, probably not. Moving forward, the CPU is an Intel 12900K. That is obviously the new P-Core, E-Core, 12th gen stuff. So it's gonna be interesting when we go to emulate a lower end CPU, which is one of the things I plan on doing here, which is swapping out the GPU for some lower end stuff and then upgrading it based on minimum requirement or minimum specs, recommended specs, and then balls of the wall specs, which this one is, to see where we find that 60 FPS intersect. But the GPU that they pre-installed in here is an Asus Strix 3080 Ti. So clearly a monster of a GPU for just about any game. 64 gigabytes of DDR5, way more than we need. And because we're running 4 sticks, I'm actually not running Intel's XMP, because with 4 sticks and XMP, it won't post. Good old 12th gen. So I chose just to go with capacity over fastity, because of the fact that I left all 4 in there because I like the way it looks fully populated. Otherwise, if I took out 2 sticks, then I'd be able to run XMP and we have 6,000 megahertz. Otherwise, right now it's running at the DDR5 base, which is so far ahead of DDR4, it really doesn't matter. And then obviously we got power supply in here, EVGA, G6. Great power supply, nothing else to really talk about there. But keeping it cool is an Nzxt Kraken with the LCD screen, which we have currently set to CPU temperature, because that is the temp I'm most concerned with it being an Intel 12th gen. I can go into Nzxt Cam and I can just literally point it at any part of the system I want to show temperatures. So it will show me GPU if I switch it to that, and you can actually customize it and have it show multiple things, cycle between things. There's a lot of stuff going on in there. The motherboard is an Asus Z690. I'm not sure exactly which one it is because I don't have them all visually identified by memory yet, and the GPU is so dang big with it being a triple slot, it's covering the name. And then for storage, we do have a Seagate FireCuda M.2 SSD, which is installed here on the ROG Hyper M.2, which instead of having the DIMM.2, which is over here next to the RAM, on 12th gen, they kind of moved to this, what they call Hyper M.2, which physically goes right on the PCI Express slots. So that's why I'm sitting here in the BIOS right now, because I need to, like I said, emulate a lower end CPU. Now the minimum spec for CPU on this guy is an Intel 8400. That is a 6-core, 6-thread, non-hyper-threading, 4.0 gigahertz capped out CPU. For the super savvy out there that are probably already angrily face rolling their keyboard right now saying, Jay, that's not a fair representation because there's way more cache and architectural IPC changes and such for this CPU versus an 8400. And you're absolutely right. But this will give us some indication of what the scaling is like with CPU. So I'm gonna go in here right now to my CPU configuration. So remember, there are 8 E-cores. They're all disabled now. Or I guess I could have just disabled all of them right here. Imagine them having a drop down that just hey, do all of them at once. All right, active performance cores, 6. So we now have 6 active performance cores. DDR5 is way faster than DDR4, even at its base spec. However, I do not see memory being something that's going to really uplift any performance here because of the fact that we are artificially limiting the CPU so much. And that performance core ratio that we are going to be limiting it to is 4 gigs. Oh yeah, hyper-threading needs to be turned off, good idea. And that should be right here, disabled off. So now we have 6-core, 6-thread, 4.0 CPU. Theoretically, I'll double check it, don't worry. Okay, it worked, success. That was actually fairly easy. So 6-core, 6-thread, right? So 6-core, 6 logical processors. And it's actually not that far off, because see, it says base speed of 3.19. The base of an 8400 is 3.0. So it's 3.0 and then turbo clock of 4.0. So actually doing pretty good here. But obviously, no one should ever pair a 8400 with a 3080 Ti. So now we're gonna throw in what is the minimum requirement, which is a 1060 3 gig. Now the 1060 is still a very popular GPU. It's still a very high end, highly represented in the Steam survey. So that's what we are going to start with. Now that we have thoroughly downgraded our awesome BLD computer here, we got our overlay going, 60 FPS in the menu, obviously. Dang it, I didn't bring a controller, whatever. So if you're in the menu creating a character, you have to right click the mouse to bring up an emulated controller where you can select the button that emulates the A button or the B button or the right bumper. Is stupid. I'm gonna tell you right now, there's no built-in benchmark in this game. This is the starting zone. It's probably the least demanding area, but regardless, this is what we have to work with. So we are currently at 39 FPS. GPU's at 99% as you expect. So CPU is exactly what I expected. This is not gonna probably be a very intensive game, considering the fact that it's at 44% with only 6 cores, 6 threads. Settings right now currently though, so everything's set to maximum right now. Resolution is 1440p. I feel like that is a realistic resolution to test here. So many more people are getting 1440p panels now, so you can get them down the high $200, low $300 range. So this is the worst case scenario here so far. It's cool looking. The FPS is about where I would expect. High 30s though, actually, I'm surprised. A 3 gig card in the high 30s with everything maxed out. What is that? It's like General Grievous, but if he were a crab thing. Am I dead? How do you turn on flashlight? So pretty average of 40 FPS. I'm like genuinely surprised. Ooh, it's pretty. Now the FPS came down. 29. Woo! Because the draw distance and everything's maxed out right now, so it's foliage and all that stuff. So 30 FPS, very, very cinematic. So if I go to 1080, so I mean, realistically, if you had a 1060, you probably aren't gonna be trying to do, max settings 1440. So let's go medium settings. Not a big change. Fidelity-wise, for sure, it looks awful out there. And I think it's intentionally making the draw distance, of course, but look at the aliasing. Ugh. Let me go down there and fight that guy. Do I fight that guy? I don't know. We're gonna go fight that guy. Because I have to see what happens. Oh, there, okay, so that's the stutter people were talking about. The game doesn't load certain shaders and such until the first time they're loaded, and then later on, it's not so bad. But the first time it loads something graphically, there's a huge pause right there. Again, just did it again. And again. Do I fight you? Oh boy. Okay, yes I do. He's a tree sentinel. Oh wow.
Welcome to Dark Souls.
All right, note to self, don't attack that guy. But now that things have loaded, the FPS is, it's ugly. It's really ugly. Because everything's just gross. It's like you're looking through, it feels like I'm streaming it from the cloud. That's how bad it looks, like bad decoder kind of a deal. Okay, so I did medium. What if we do high? Aliasing is what looks terrible on it. See, not much change in FPS. We lost 3 or 4 looking out in the distance, but it definitely looks better. Okay, so that's a 1060 at 1080. Let's go back to 1440. I expect to drop down into the low 50s, high 40s, or into the 30s. But you know what though? A lot of the blotchiness and ugliness we were seeing was just the fact that it's 1080p on a 1440p monitor. But still, mid 30s. I don't personally believe that we'd be able to get 60 FPS necessarily in 1440 out of a 1063 gig. So 1440p, medium settings right now are at high 30s, low 40s, which is terrible. Although playable, It's consistent. It's not bouncing all around, which is a good thing. It's consistent. If I attack this guy, come back. Why? What? I want lamb chops for dinner. See, I can do that too. Oh, all right, let's go ahead and switch to the 1070 8GB card, which is the minimum recommended. All right, so I threw in the GeForce GTX 1070 for the win, but remember, 8400 was the minimum required spec for the CPU. 8700K, which is a 6-core, 12-thread, hyper-threaded 8th gen CPU, is what we need to emulate now. So for the same thing, I'm going to enable, actually I don't even need to do that, I don't think. Active efficiency cores, 0. Active performance cores, 6. And then hyper-threading enabled, which is we want. Per core hyper-threading, I'm just gonna leave that. But we also have to limit our frequency. So if I go performance core ratio, sync all cores, and then we're gonna say 47. And the reason why I'm saying 47 is 4.7 gigahertz is the turbo clock for 8700K. So not only are we gaining hyper-threading for double the logical cores, we are also gaining 700 megahertz core clock. Not gonna make a difference, I don't think, because of the fact that, I mean, the 1060 wasn't even maxing out the CPU. The 1070 isn't going to either, but this should help with some of our processing, obviously, on the GPU side of things. Let's get back to where we were and try and avoid the big guy on a horse. So there we go, we got our Intel i9 12900K 6-core, 12-thread, 4.7 gigahertz CPU loaded now. Yes, for all you haters out there, it has more cache and it's running DDR5, so it's not fair, but it's close enough, okay? With the 1070, I'm predicting maybe in 1440p medium to high settings, we'll see 50s, I think. What we're looking for here is obviously 60 non-fluctuating, which is probably not gonna happen even with a 3080 Ti because of the fact that the game itself is kind of a early access, not early access, but early life port, which takes a few updates to really get smoothed out. I mean, it's a Souls game, so it probably will get sorted out. It's just, it's that day one growing pains, if you will. If you got PS5, apparently plays great on that. Oof. That initial loading, like that stutter right there when you turn around. Again, it's like all the shaders and stuff only load the first time they're really supposed to do something instead of preloading them as you're loading the game, which most games do. With the CPU update, which as you can see right here, if you look, I mean, 30% load, 57 to 60 watts of use. GPU is still fully maxed out though, 98%. This is so much better already. It's amazing what one tier of a GPU did in an old 10 series card. So if I come over here now to settings, we are currently on medium, and that's 1440p medium, mind you. Here's high. Look at that. It's actually pretty good. Like this is more playable than I was actually expecting, if you want to know the truth. I truly was not expecting it to be, that's some big weeds right there, man. Anyway. Don't roly-poly away, don't roly-poly away. Oh, roly-poly! Okay, can it do maximum settings? I don't know if this gets harder in different parts of the game. Obviously, this is just the starting area. But it looks like, so it looks like we're maintaining 50s. Whoa, there's two big stutters right there. That's actually better than I expected it to be, if you want to know the truth. 1440p, 1070 for the win, 8700K emulated, 50 FPS and max settings 1080, 1440. If I go 1080, there's 60. And it doesn't look as bad, obviously, as it did on the other card because we're still maximum settings right now. So it looks like currently, although it's a little smudgy out in the distance, I do attribute that to the fact that we are on a 1440p panel. But look at this, 60 FPS, max settings, 1080p doable with a 1070, which actually makes me happy because that is a 6-year-old card, right? 2016 to 2022, that is a 6-year-old card. And you can play a title that just came out. All right, time to fully unlock the CPU, time to put the big old GPU in there, and let's see how it looks. We now have all our E-cores and P-cores back, and we have a 3080 Ti in there. I mean, is there any doubt this is gonna be 1440p, 60 FPS locked? I'm curious now about the stutters, because the stutters, that's not hardware related at all, honestly. That's the game. I'm calling 60 FPS locked for obvious reasons. maximum settings. I mean, so far as expected. I mean, the performance right now is, I mean, the CPU is 14%. GPU sure shows 75 to 80% utilization. Tree Sentinel.
Go inside.
Ah!
Oh, jeez.
Duh! That was. All right, we're going 4K now. This is a stats nerd's dream type of game. I got 27.2% extra parry. How to trigger an entire genre. Hey! The Church of Ede. Well, hey. 4K, 60 FPS. The stuttering still present, but not as bad, honestly. I'll be honest. So, and I'm just gonna kind of end the performance sort of right along here. I like to do these more live performance type videos because you can see, if I was just to chart this, if I was to just do a chart, that doesn't capture the stutters like I showed you, and the fact that it was correlating between player pop-in and, is that a kangaroo? This is a Disney movie? What's with all the animals? Anyway, the chart won't correlate those pop-ins and stuff like that coinciding with the stutters. So, but medium settings, even high settings, 1070, 1440, very playable FPS. Probably gets harder later on in the game if there's more things happening. Clearly, like going along with the video that I just did, don't need a 12900K and a 3080. Who are you? Why are you hitting me? You know what? Your experience is what you are. All that and you didn't have anything worth taking? Give me the helmet. Sneak attack. Okay, whatever. Don't need a super high-end PC to play games as long as the game is intended, you know, encoded properly and optimized, which this game is still not optimized. So looking good. 1070 with an 8700K, at least in our emulated version, had no problem whatsoever playing this game. What has your experience been like with Elden Ring? Sorry, Elden Ring. I asked on Twitter and most of you said you guys were absolutely loving the game. Quite a few of you said it was an optimization, like complete disaster. I don't know if I would necessarily agree with the word disaster, but it definitely can use some work. Also too, a huge thank you to Nzxt for providing us this system for us to do this testing with. That way I didn't have to take the time to build one, or, because believe it or not, Nick, we've just about disassembled all those systems that were sitting assembled. Huh? Yeah, so I have nothing except our test bench was a 10900K. Anyway, again, thanks BLD for providing us with this system. You guys find a link down below to BLD services if you're looking at building or buying your very first or upgraded system. They have parts available, ready to build right now. So thanks for watching, guys. Sound off with your Elden Ring experience down below and what your specs are, more importantly. Really curious to hear what those are. We'll see you guys in the next one. And eventually I'm gonna kill this guy, but not today.